Well, my name's Andy Norman, and I'm a litigator from Malkin Baker. And as far as Tom goes, I just want to say that as an expert witness, he has been excellent in this case. And I'm going to tell you just for a minute or two, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the case that he's on. But he is one of those expert witnesses who can actually, on cross-examination, strengthen your case. And he did that during cross-examination, and I didn't have to take any notes for what they call redirect, what comes after that. So he's done a super job, and he's very thorough, and you could tell when he's saying, what is the deficiency? Well, he knows so much. I mean, you've been doing it, well, you said 12,000 inspections, and he's incredible. So in any event, the case that we're dealing with is a condo. And the thing that he said, there's a lot of wisdom in what he says, by the way. When you're buying property, recognizing, of course, that it's probably the biggest investment you'll ever make, there are many things you can do. Hiring a home inspector, a quality home inspector, who is not bidden to the seller's real estate agent is really important, but also doing all the background information too, talking to neighbors, coming by in the evening, does your neighbor have 7 dogs, and there's just a lot of stuff you really want to thoroughly check out, and that checklist is a great start on that, but you want to have the frame of mind when you go into this to think about the truth of the situation. You're likely to live there, even if you're planning on moving, you're likely to live there for long enough that it matters to really be careful, and if you're not, you may end up in the place that my clients were in. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But one other thing, also understand that there are a lot of protections in the law for real estate buyers. However, they're not enough. And the problem is that sellers can be honest, but they see the transaction from a totally different perspective than you see it. They want to sell the property. They're thinking already of the new place they're going to move to or whatever they're doing. If it's investment, they're just thinking of the bottom line. They may be honest. And not all of them are honest, but even the honest ones have a different perspective, so you need to be very careful. So for example, and there's a big difference between new property that you're buying and used property in the protections you have in the law. So if you're buying a home that has been lived in by somebody else, your main protection comes from something called the Residential Real Property Disclosure Act, which was referenced before a little bit, I think, by both people, especially by Tom briefly, though, which requires the seller to fill out a disclosure form telling you about problems that may be in the property. And as I think Tom said, it's based on actual knowledge. So in other words, it's not going to cover everything that's wrong in the house because there are tons of latent defects in houses. But it's an actual knowledge standard which is tough to prove in court. And then also the standard for what is a material defect. They only have to disclose what's a material defect. Well, the standard is something that substantially impairs the value of the real estate or the safety and health of the buyer. So that's a pretty high standard. In other words, you're going to buy that. You want to know if there's a $5,000 repair that needs to be made, or if that, if that roof has a leak in it and it's 25 years old and it hasn't been repaired. That's stuff you're really going to want to know, but it may not be disclosed, and it may not be illegal not to disclose it. So I just want to warn you. Now, if you have new property that you're buying or old property that's had enough construction to be considered new, there are more protections. There's the Consumer Fraud Act and other things which I can elaborate on in the questions section. I won't go into that in great detail, but let me tell you a little bit about this particular condominium. It's an 11-unit condominium. 4 of the units are commercial on the main floor. It's on Pulaski near Montrose. And those commercial units, there was a doctor's office. She had a short sale and get out of there. But there was a doctor's office that took up 2 of the 4 units, and then there's a store and a commercial accountant's office in there. And then there are 7 residential units. And it turns out, cutting this whole very long story, and we've been in litigation for 5 years now, or 4.5, I forgot. It started in 2009, so that would make it over 5 years now. So that's scary. But anyway, the problem is mostly water. And the problems were virtually all, not entirely all, but virtually all in the common areas. And so, and the residential property disclosures were primarily about it didn't disclose virtually anything of the latent defects that were in this property. And the problem with the property basically is water. It was water coming from 3 different locations, or in three different directions, let me say. One was through the roof, and Tom, he gave us a 48-page report on this, and he must have had 50 pictures just of the roof alone with holes in it. I mean, it was such a shoddy job, but if you look at the real estate disclosures, you're not going to see anything about that. And these were all latent defects in 2009. It wasn't showing up. Actually, they started selling in 2007 or 8. But in any event, water was coming in through the roof, through a number of places, and you understand when you look at the potholes that we're dealing with now, little water gets into a part of the roof or some opening in the roof. And in Chicago, you know how it gets cold and warm and cold and warm. Well, you've got the freeze and thaw thing. A little bit of water gets in there, and it expands and contracts and expands and contracts. As it turns into ice, it expands. And so all of a sudden, it's making holes in the roof. And so now all the condo units, or not all of them, but virtually all the condo units have water coming in from the top. And it's a serious problem that they've had to make special assessments of over $100,000 to fund the litigation, to do repairs, remediation to keep the place going, and other defects. I'm not going to be able to get into them all. Then there was water coming through the masonry because there were gaps in the masonry, and there were all kinds of problems with the quality of the masonry. And again, Tom has opened our eyes to all this stuff. And then water backing up in the basement because they did a shoddy job on everything that was in the basement. So, I mean, it's an amazing thing that now these people, and from the outside, this is the most beautiful condo thing. What it was a 2-story condominium unit, and so they created a 3rd floor and put on a whole new roof. And so for the facade is beautiful, and it's got a capstone on it that's gorgeous. It's curved, but they didn't they didn't put flashing over it properly, so it leaks through it. And so and you would look at it, you would think this is a high-end kind of place in a swanky area in Chicago, and it's not. So the bottom line is there are many things that you need to do now. When you're looking at the property, Tom is going to give you a head start on, or whoever you get as a home inspector is going to give you a head start on this. But then when you find out that there are some problems, then you need to go back to the owner, or if you have an attorney, and you should for a purchase have an attorney, then you need to take the information that he gives to you, and consult with him about what's really involved. He did a fabulous budget for us. And this is something, as he was saying, I don't know if it got emphasized enough, but the repair costs to undo the problems that he highlights are really significant, because you want to know how much is involved here, and that's going to affect obviously the purchase price, as well as maybe it will kill the deal, but you don't want to get in. Let me just talk a little bit more then. If you're buying new property, or if you're buying property, for example, that's new construction, and you're the next in line after another purchaser who hasn't been there that long, you have more protections. And let me just put a few other things out there. There's something called the implied warranty of habitability, which is a creation of the courts, actually. There's no legislation on it yet, but it's been around for probably 30 years now. The implied warranty of habitability, if you buy real estate, and this also applies if you're renting too, if you buy real estate, it requires a certain standard of habitability. It's not just that you can actually live there without dying. It's got a set of standards that goes with it that enable you to have some leverage over the seller to correct deficiencies. There's also something called the Consumer Fraud Act. And again, if you have a purchase of new real estate from a developer, or again, if you're second in line, that it's still close in time to the time of the development, that you may still have claims for consumer fraud or just for breaching standards that come with new property. There's better protections for you there, although that doesn't mean that you don't do all your homework. You still need to get the inspection, because I've handled also cases for people who have bought new homes in new developments that were from reputable builders and still had significant problems, which were what are called material defects. Right, that's a serious, so the question was, what if the developer puts together, and this is always the case, the developer puts an LLC together, and by the time you get there, the LLC is out of business, it's dissolved, developer is gone. Well, that's a serious problem. It happens a lot. In our case, there are some times where you still, it's a big enough developer that they're still going to be around. If, someone who does one condominium development probably will do another one or another one after that in the neighborhood. Now, if you have, let's say, a condominium development, then you've got the Condo Act, and you can go after the principals in the company. Also, look for what are called fraudulent transfers. When we let the developer of this condo association know that we were about to sue them, they started transferring to themselves the unsold units for no charge, which is what's called a fraudulent transfer. Well, we were able to go into court and get those units locked up, and so they've not been able to transfer them. We also have a bank account of over $100,000, which we were able to latch onto. So oftentimes when I get into the costs with condo associations about the issues that they have, it's too expensive, or it's not likely that you're going to be able to get money out of the developer. If it's not a condo association, and I'll get right to you, if it's not a condo association, but just a builder who's no longer in the area, it's not going to be worth bringing a lawsuit. One other point you made, I just want to emphasize it, and then I'm going to let you ask a question, is city inspections. You think, and this is the position that the defendants in our case are taking, well, this property was inspected and we got a certificate of occupancy, so there are no problems here, right? Right? Is that really true? The city inspectors do a crummy job. Most of the time, they're not required to look out for the homeowners, although they're there to protect them. The courts have said that city inspectors cannot be sued for negligent inspections or for not bringing out defects, and so and most of these guys are patronage jobs, or women are patronage jobs. They don't care that much, and it's the government, and they're just not doing a good job of protecting you. So also, and you had mentioned about getting 3 years worth of condo association board minutes, because you're going to see in there, if you go back 3 years, even 1 year, if you go back 5 years, you'll see all the issues that they've been discussing as a series of unit owners, as the condo association. You're going to learn a lot of stuff. So,
this Illinois law, the 225 ILCS 441, our licensing law says we cannot disclose the information to anybody but the client without the client's. The law says written permission, the rule says verbal permission. So if the seller's there, and they often are, and they're following me around, I ask them to leave. And they leave.
if there's a problem, if you're the buyer and there's a problem with conditions that were not properly disclosed on the disclosure form, then there is, in the Real Property Disclosure Act, a provision for attorney's fees to be awarded and damages to be awarded against the seller of the property. So if you do have a problem that wasn't properly disclosed, then you can, first of all, you don't just file a lawsuit, you would go to the seller and try and work it out. But if you can't, then you have this fee shifting provision, which enables you to afford litigation, which could be fairly expensive. So that's something to keep in mind.
Roofs are inspected from 3 different perspectives professionally, right? One of them is you will walk it or climb it. The state law says we're not supposed to endanger our lives if it's, and also you can damage many of them, so we don't want to damage the roof. So if it's a flat roof, oftentimes if there's access, and there usually is a door at the 2nd floor or something, we can look out or walk it, but we're not required to walk it. One way, and all of this context is visual exam. So one way would be to walk it. The other way that would be to inspect it would be to look at it with binoculars from the ground. I'm kind of crafty sometimes. If there's a neighbor's porch and the gate is open, I'll run up the neighbor's porch and try to get a look down on the property and take a bunch of photographs. And then the third way that's kind of a sleeper people don't think about is you get into the attic and you look for water in the attic. The Illinois Home Inspector licensing law as of 2012 requires all home inspectors to point out any evidence of water, not water only, but stains. So from when you're inside the attic and I'll find evidence of water, I say, oh, we've had a roof leak here, and my report it says, ask the seller for a roof repair receipt. And sometimes they don't have them, and sometimes they say, look, it wasn't a bad enough leak, it was ice damming or something. But home inspectors in Illinois always are supposed to be acting in their client's best interest. That's 1410-300 of the licensing law, the administrative rule.